Hey friends, it's Melvin. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Here's just a few quick things I wanted to notify you guys about before we get started. First up, very soon, new episodes will be releasing Wednesday mornings rather than Tuesday. So don't panic if you don't see a new episode on Tuesday. Just wait a little longer and you'll see it in your feed. Second, we've introduced a mailbag. Check those show notes and toward the bottom you'll see a mailbag link. You'll then be able to text us any questions you might have about movies, the movie industry, or any movie/Christian related questions you might have. Then we'll respond in a future episode, so send us your questions now. Up next, Patreon polls, which are available to Patreon supporters at the $3 tier or higher, have been updated. Supporters can now suggest films or shows to be reviewed at the end of each month. The two most liked submissions will become the options for the Patreon poll. So if you want to hear us talk about your favorite movie or show, join our Patreon and start campaigning. And lastly, whether you're a new or longtime listener, please consider writing a review or rating the Cinematic Doctrine podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Apart from financially supporting on Patreon, these are the two most helpful ways to support the show. And that's it. Enjoy the episode. You're listening to Cinematic Doctrine.
But hey, if you just press play, though, you are totally missing out on about 27 minutes of us talking about Chip and Dale, me, Daniel, and our guest today, Shirleon, who, if you are on Twitter, I guess at this point a week ago, you know that Chip and Dale was an interesting release that no one knew that they needed in their life. And so check out our Patreon support for $3 a month. That is the lowest and least expensive tier. You get access to all kinds of content that you otherwise don't if you're just listening to the show. At this point, you're missing out on a discussion about Netflix with our last one, which frankly could have been on this one. And kind of how Netflix is just this bizarre thing that has always been overpriced and really just needs to figure their stuff out. Otherwise, they're going to have to start selling their IP to survive at this point. Or, goodness, I don't even... What did we talk about 2 weeks ago? We had a really long discussion about something else that was really interesting. But I guess you'd find out if you supported us on Patreon. Super quick and easy. It's always in the show notes. You also get to choose something we review, which, hey, that is what we're talking about now with Archive 81. That is something that you guys picked, all the Patreon supporters picked for us to talk about, which is bittersweet because now I'm just liking something else that's not getting a continuation on Netflix. So thanks for that. But garners really interesting discussions. So head on over to the Patreon. You get to influence the show. You get to tune into extra content. Like I said, 27 minutes of us talking about Chip and Dale, which has strangely plenty enough to talk about. But in the meantime, first off, let's, I guess, reintroduce our guest, Shirleon. Thanks so much for being on the show. What's going on?
Thanks for having me. Nothing really. Honestly, I'm honestly hoping not to get sick at this point because.
Oh my gosh.
Because hubby is like not close to death. I was going to say that as a joke, but he really isn't.
It's like, what are you doing recording a podcast? Right. Sorry, honey, I can't be with you when you die.
I stepped away from the wake to talk about Archive 81.
Yeah.
No, he's super under the weather. Not COVID. We had some like leftover COVID tests from when we moved. So he's negative for that, which is good. But
nice.
He's been running a low grade fever the last couple of days, all that kind of fun stuff. So, but I'm starting to finally feel it in the back of my throat. So I'm really hoping not to catch it. Hopefully my immune system continues to kick butt.
Spotify came out with a new 4D add-on where you get sick if you listen to a podcast where someone else is sick.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you got monkeypox? I hear that's going around again.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah.
You had actually reached out to us saying, hey, if you ever talk about Archive 81, let me know. It'd be fun to be on the episode.
Yeah.
So why'd you ask? I mean, I know why, but let me play the listener. Why are you on the episode? What are you interested about?
Well, I am an archivist or archivist. Doesn't matter how you pronounce it. It means archivist. Archivist. I totally spell it that way in my head when I say it, so I can spell it correctly. Yeah, so I actually do. I was going to say I do what Dan does in the show, but I actually don't, because I don't physically or personally work with film preservation. Mm-hmm. But I have some knowledge of like what is done and how it works just based on my schooling and stuff. But
have you ever seen spirits when you do it?
No. That'd be really creepy though.
Darn.
I know.
Have you ever experienced the Holy Spirit while reading the Bible?
Yes, I have. Especially in the last couple of weeks. I've been going through Ecclesiastes. So you really feel it with that book. But yeah, so like I mostly work. I don't really actually even do preservation. I thought about going into it, but it's a lot of like you have to learn chemicals and stuff. And I just was never good at chemistry. So I've worked with like organizing historical documents for like companies or organizations, people, townships. I worked at a township archive for a bit, but now I'm working on digital archiving. If any of our listeners are familiar with the Wayback Machine, a project that I'm working on is saving a bunch of stuff about COVID-19 to the Wayback Machine for the National Institutes of Health. So I basically just copy and paste a bunch of links to make sure that people can know what's been going on with COVID-19. So
that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
We thought it was only going to be a 3-month project. Turns out it was like almost 3 years.
Oh my word. No way.
Well, that's when it started. It was at the beginning of COVID. We're like, it's not going to last that long. Here we are.
Yeah.
But they do other stuff too.
Remember when COVID was supposed to be 2 weeks long?
Right.
Remember that?
Yeah. So
we were going to be back.
It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. So this was kind of a fun thing to watch, although I have some disappointments, but we can get into that later. And they're probably not even that trivial, but I think they are kind of big. So
hey there, it's your friendly neighborhood call to action. Just checking in on you. Hope you're doing all right. I'm just stopping by to say, if you enjoy the show, you can always subscribe and write a review for Cinematic Doctrine. There's iTunes, Podchaser, basically anywhere you listen. You can give us a shout out with a thumbs up, 5 stars, gripping positivity. Or if you hate the show, you can say that too.
Wait, what? What are you saying? Why are you saying
Well, I'm not going to tell them what to do, Ted. They're free to do what they want. Our analytics say we got a lot of listeners in the US, and they love their freedoms. And you're also free to check out our Twitter. Very active there. We host polls, memes. There's also the Cinematic Doctrine Facebook group called Cinematic Doctrine Facebook Group. If you want to join, just answer the questions, read the rules, and tell them the podcast sent you. Also, you should check out our website. Some really cool stuff there. Editorials, written reviews for movies we haven't had time to cover. Always check out cinematicdoctrine.com when you get the chance. Oh, Ted also told me I shouldn't forget to mention the Patreon. Something about you can support us or something? Wait, Ted, I thought this was like a hobby thing. You want me to
expand Cinematic Doctrine. You know this already.
Right. Yeah, I forgot. I'm the one who put all this together. Yeah, Cinematic Doctrine has a Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can gain access to early uncut episodes of the podcast. Oh, and did I mention, you get to tell us what to do. That's right, each month you get to vote on a movie we discuss on the show. Anyways, I gotta run, so I'll see you guys later.
Well, then, Dan, do you want to go ahead and introduce the show then for us?
Archive 81 is a... oh my gosh, what just happened to me?
It's spreading.
It's like the virus in the movie Pulse. You guys ever see that movie?
No.
I have not.
Anyway, Archive 81 it is a horror mystery culty show put out by Netflix. It streamed in January of 2022. It is developed by Rekha Sunshine and stars, oh my gosh, Mahmoudo Athi and Dina Shihabi. And it is about a young archivist who gets a mysterious job. He's offered a tantalizing amount of money to go to a remote location at this really cool place to try and archive footage recovered from a camera at a hotel that mysteriously burned down. And as he begins to recover the footage, a mystery that has been laid dormant slowly becomes clear to him, and he finds himself sentences being pulled into the mystery along the way. And it turns out he's perhaps more intrinsically tied to the events from back in 1994 than he realized. I recommended this on the podcast, I believe, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you did somewhere, I think in like February. It was a little after.
Yes, I recommended the first 7.5 episodes of the 8-episode show.
Yep.
I found the show to have a wonderful atmosphere. I love the mystery. I love analog technology as a thing. I found it very intriguing, and I actually found the characters to be really likable for the most part. Some of them get into the stock of like a mysterious person who is oddly cryptic for no reason. Like there's like 8 or 9 of those people in this show, so that gets a little tiresome for me after a while. Yeah. But overall, I really liked the main leads, and I liked the mystery. And then it just completely falls apart for some reason at the very end. And I actually am on the Reddit for this show /podcast, and there was a large number of people that were like, "Don't worry, guys, you just gotta let it play out. You gotta see what happens in seasons 2, 3, and 4." And boy, did I laugh recently. So, but I don't know who to throw to. Do I throw it to Shirley? Do I throw it to Melvin?
Let's hear what Shirleon thinks first, because I have to go to the bathroom.
Oh, dear. Okay.
What'd you think, Cheryl?
The magic of radio.
Right.
Just sidebar, radio hosts, they love commercial breaks and will never get rid of them, because it's like you got 2 minutes to go to the bathroom. So you have like an entire collection of radio hosts all sitting around a table just running to make as fast as they can to go to the bathroom.
They're on the 8th floor, the bathroom's on the 1st floor, frantically hitting the button on the elevator.
And some stupid intern has like a stomach bug. So you're just stuck. But yeah, Cheryl, what'd you think of the show? Because I have to go pee.
Oh my gosh. Okay, what did I think? So I told my brother I was going to rewatch it for the podcast. I lied. I didn't end up rewatching it because it was Thursday. I was finishing up the work week, and then Friday came along. I had to do a bunch of stuff this week, so I just didn't really have like the time to invest.
I mean, what is your overall like just general impression? Like if I stopped on the street for some reason was like, "What do you think of Archive 81? Should I watch it?"
It kind of loses me halfway through. Like once I don't know how much we want to talk about this show, but once like the reason for the spookiness is brought up, I didn't care as much anymore. Like I loved I meant to look up the definition of this word, but the ambiguity of like what is going on, what's with the spookiness, what is this, the mystery. Yeah, I guess, but that's such a boring word. Like I liked that. And then when it was explained to me what was going on and what the purpose of everything was, I just didn't care as much.
The routine falter of like a horror story is if you start revealing too much, it can really lose the mystery.
And like this is where I think like honestly, and again, I haven't listened to the podcast either, so I don't know how they do it there.
The Archive 81 podcast?
The Archive 81 podcast, yeah. So what I would have enjoyed is like, so the whole demon thing that goes on, I feel like that would have been a better reveal for season 2. Like even at the end of the last episode, kind of reveal what's going on and like leave the first season to be just totally like, what is happening? This is spooky. Like keep the like person creeping up behind you, just a total mystery. Don't reveal it until the very last episode and then go into it, because that's where it lost me, was like, now we know we're going to follow and like try to raise this demon. Let's go into the past and like see what these people are doing back in whatever it was, the 20s or something, and go into this whole detail. And then it just turned into that. And I'm like, okay, I'm just not at that interest. I ended up watching the whole thing and like not quite binging it, but I think I finished it in maybe a week. And so I enjoyed it enough.
Like back when it came out.
Yeah. But like, that's just kind of where I lost complete interest. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it.
That's interesting because, like, for me, I'll come out the gate and say I actually really enjoyed the show. I think I do agree that the ending of the show sort of peters out. The quality of the pacing is dramatically different in the last 40, 20, 30 minutes of the show than the rest of it. I also agree with you, Dan, that I like the characters. I immediately really liked Dan Turner as a character. I said to Kat, I like that he's curiously reserved. He's because he's not shy. He's very personal. He doesn't share a lot, but he's an archivist who likes investigating stuff. So he's not afraid of being in danger. So he's not shy, but he's very secure about his privacy. And so you have this
really well performed, balanced character of being both a mystery himself, but wanting to find the truth about other things, which is a good contrast as an audience member to enjoy. That, like, here's this character who's doing what I want him to, which is to find out more information. And yet the biggest mystery is he himself in some ways. So I enjoyed that. And I found a lot of the dialogue clever and smart. In fact, I found the show in general really quite intelligent with how it revealed information and stuff. Like one scene in particular, I think it's like episode 3. I forget who he's talking to. He's talking to Ratty, which was cute. A little sidekick name, who's just a rat he finds in the compound. And he's talking about like how he could be like, if he didn't know better, LMG could be a board game production company or something like that. And like later in the episode, there's just sort of a mention that the CEO, or at least just lead modern day villain, Davenport, kind of just is leaving, and he briefly says something like, you and I are very similar. We're like game masters or something. And the camera doesn't just zoom in on Dan's face or something. Music doesn't intensely start playing. He doesn't have he doesn't break into sweats. It's just a clear line that tells you what we already suspected, which is that this guy is being watched. And we already knew that because the end of the first episode reveals that. But there's just a lot of little lines like that are throughout the show that kind of share a cleverness in filmmaking that shares information in a mild-mannered, slow-paced way. This is a James Wan production. I don't know how involved he was, other than perhaps going, that's a cool idea, I'll give you some money for it. But
or just really like the podcast and he like hooked them up with someone in Hollywood or something.
Exactly. Like maybe he tuned in and it was like, this could be perfect for film, because James Wan loves the idea of another world. He loves the idea of how that, like, not fatal paranormal situations, but just the idea of like, yeah, but if ghosts exist, that's scary. So he, like, this is clearly very much a thing like him. Like, it has Insidious vibes in some way, and very much more Insidious than in Conjuring, that's for sure. It's really well paced in all of that, which is again why the last episode can be so disjointed and strange, because it feels like it should have been 2 episodes long. It felt so, there's just a lot of information dumped.
It just becomes a different show for the last like 20, 25 minutes.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah, because even Dan Turner's motivation changes from to continue with things I even liked, the fact that there's always the truth-seeking aspect to it. This is very much like Marble Hornets, a long YouTube series that's a found footage thing where the main character, one of his friends, was working on a film project, then he vanishes, and then the tapes show up and a note that says, just burn the tapes. But the guy who collected tapes is like, I'm curious what's on them. So he starts putting them online to archive them. And as he's investigating further, there's more things that are happening that are putting himself at risk, but he can't basically fix his situation unless he learns more information, which requires him to do more tapes. And so I love that motivation that throughout the series, no matter what happens that makes Dan upset or puts him in danger, they always bring it back to finish the tapes. And it's always convincing. It always works. And I'm always motivated to continue to see how that works out. And so I love that. I also love, I'm a big fan of any sort of movie or film that isn't necessarily about Hollywood, but is actually just about watching movies. If there's ever a scene in a movie where characters just intensely watch something, no matter how silly it is, like in Mandy, when Nick Cage and Andrea Riseborough are just sitting forward, eyes wide, eating cereal in the middle of the night, watching just a silly movie. Like, I love that. And so they do that with this, where he's just intently watching these tapes and you just see the blue screen melting his face. And you could practically see the bags under his eyes being made just before your eyes.
That's just what archivists look like all the time. Because that's all we do, is we just
full
stare
goblin
at things.
mode. Yeah, it's like, it just turned into a vampire. Right. And so I love that because I think it balances well with some other with a particular what is the word? It's not a convention. It's a concession. I think that's the word. Or I don't know, but they had to decide: are we going to make all of the found footage, or are we going to shoot it like a film? So like and in the beginning, you watch him looking at the found footage tapes and it's just found footage. But then at some point it cuts to being a movie in the past. And they keep it limited to whatever is actually on the found footage or within seconds before and after. So it's the implication of, well, she obviously woke up and turned on the camera so that she can film the vent because something weird is happening in the vent. And I liked that at some point I was like, oh, well, when I watch a movie, it feels like I'm transported into it anyway. Oh, when I read a book, I feel like I'm transported into it anyway. So this works. And especially because later on they introduce, we're actually just going to go to that time anyway. So it works in that way as well. So there's just a lot of stuff that I think works well. And then lastly, it also plays along with the idea of like how art can be dangerously infectious and how like there's just the investment that you can have into art of all kinds and creation and stuff is both like this bizarrely supernatural thing of creating something into nothing or nothing into something. But also how you interpret art and stuff was all quite good. Oh my gosh. And even the fact that it's like, has an SCP kind of aesthetic. SCP is Secure Contain Protect. It's a web page that people can just contribute to. And I think it's filtered by a particular editor. I don't remember how it works. It's been a long time since I read SCP. But they're basically all these paranormal objects written from the perspective of I don't know what you call it, an organization that collects paranormal objects. Some of them are clever satire. In particular, there's apparently an item that causes procrastination. So the article is literally, I have it in my desk. I'll finish the article later. So it's really great. But then there's other terrifying ones, like a play that whenever it's performed, a killer appears. And yet you're compelled to perform the play because no one has ever seen it to its completion. And I love all that. That's all great. So I was totally into this show. I was really excited. Like I said, if you were a Patreon supporter who tuned in for the Chip and Dale thing, like if I had to choose between something to be distracted, watched, or just fully invested, it was like I'd rather get distracted watching Chip and Dale than Archive 81. I really did want to affect my emotional engagement. But then, yeah, there is a point when as more is revealed, unlike the show where more is revealed and then more questions are brought forward, the climax of the show gets to the point where more is revealed, but there is not more mystery. They don't pile on more mystery.
Yeah, I think so where there will be kind of a split between how people enjoy the show is how much they get into what becomes the A plot, which is it's something I like. There's this truth to the idea that like as we engage with anything, especially something that deals with other people, there is an inherent sort of empathy to that. And this show takes it to its extreme where as he's watching and archiving these tapes, he's getting drawn into this, what happens to this woman in the past. And he starts to sort of form a connection with her, one that becomes very literal.
Which I really liked, by the way. I loved how they did all that. It's super cool.
Yeah, like there's these interesting waking nightmare segments where he kind of talks to her and then starts to imply that he actually is kind of going to the past and becoming a part of the tapes he's watching.
Which is so cool.
Which is really, really cool. And for me, I like that. I like the idea that like as he gets more into it, it becomes less about this mystery and more about his mysterious, non-specific connection to this other person, which is something that everyone who's really been ever drawn into a show, a movie, a book has probably experienced to some extent. And like it reminds me of actually like I don't know if you guys know anything about Norm Macdonald, who is a comedian who died not too long ago, but he had this fascinating tidbit in an interview where he talks about how he hates art because he is so moved by it he can't handle it. Like he tells a story about going to an art museum and he saw this painting of a woman from like the 1700s and he just started to weep because the reality of this beautiful woman was gone and he would never meet her. It was just so crushing to him. And it's like that feeling extended for 8 episodes, but on this added layer of maybe I can do something. And to me, that became more compelling. And it's this handoff that is tricky to pull off.
It's like an indirect directness. The creativity of him being completely indirectly connected and yet still having some bizarre connection became really interesting to see how they'd explore.
Yes. And then it's just
yep.
So like for some people they're gonna like the mystery more than that, which is fine. Like I do wish that they drew out the mystery more because at a certain point it just solves the mystery. And if you're not locked into this aspect, there's not much for you to hold on to other than much like our protagonist, just wanting to see how the show wraps up. And I don't know when we want to get into the last episode, but
well, I just want to say too, like I think I was distracted by, I guess you called it plot A, like this demon thing. I was distracted by all of that I no longer cared about this connection that like Dan had to Melody. Like I could see it developing. I could see that it changed from like, oh, I just kind of want to figure this out because I'm watching these tapes. Now I'm really curious, to the switch of like, I need to figure this out so I can save her, even if she doesn't exist anymore, if she like is dead or whatever. And then all of a sudden this demon plot came out, and then it felt like that became so big and bloated that everything else just kind of became whatever's below that. And it was very distracting. And like I didn't care about that because I wanted more of that like mystery while he's trying to figure things out, and give me more of that like waking nightmare conversation with her. And like I didn't even mind like the face coming out of the screens, but then when you gave me the reason for that, I just stopped caring. Because I'm not into any of that kind of stuff. I think demon exorcism, raising, all that's just creepy as heck. And so like I don't care. But at the same time, like I'm also not as like freaked out by it as much as I am of like, I don't know what's going on. I'm more freaked out by the unknowing than the knowing of this demon. I don't even know what his purpose was. Like when they're like, what, like they brought him back, like why? Like what was the point? Like it just was weird. Yeah, it was so strange.
It is disappointing. It is disappointing. I 100% grant you that. It is. I was surprised that they gave the bag away so quickly.
It was like what, episode 4 or something? That was just like, here's the information. Really it's so weird.
You mean like when they introduce that there's a cult meeting in the community room? Because they introduced that pretty quickly.
Well, even that I didn't care. I didn't mind that. There's still an air of mystery to that. Like, oh, they're praying to this thing or whatever. And there is the connection to the snuff film that they talk about. I think in the very first episode, they talk about the snuff film that has never been found, which is super interesting. Which, like, that even just kind of harkens back. I'm going to put my archivist hat on real quick of like, of film from like the 1920s and like silent film and all that kind of stuff is all gone because
pretty much,
either it was made from nitrate film, which if you have no idea what happens to nitrate film, just go on YouTube and look it up because it's
watch Inglourious
really cool.
Bastards.
It just burns and burns and burns, and you can't put it out. So like there's fires that you just kind of have to let them burn. You can't save anything. It just happens. But then also I was just reading because I had to review myself that like film companies, to make space, they just destroyed film. So like there's silent films also because of the advent of talkies. They didn't want silent film anymore. It wasn't going to make any money, so they just got rid of them. So there's like all this stuff that doesn't exist anymore, which is fascinating. So now like film preservationists are like, we got to get our hands on this and digitize, which is what Dan is doing for a bit of a different reason. But so they find the snuff film and everyone's just like, oh, it's just fiction. Well, spoilers, it's not fiction. So like, and like, that's fine. But then when it's like, okay, now these cult members are literally going to do what the snuff film did, you just kind of gave it away there. And I'm like, okay, go back, like let her sneak into more cult meetings and like see what they do and like give us a little bit more of that. She snuck into one and then that was it. And then it's like the next episode they revealed what they were trying to do. And it just, I don't know. It just felt flat for me.
For me, it was actually another thing I liked. I like locational horror. And since this was a single place in New York, the idea of like, it's just in a populated area and
this is
here we are being evil. No one knows. I do like the idea though that they were so like blatantly comfortable. They were blatantly comfortable with being bad, and like there was almost nothing that could be done. That confidence in the cultish evil is in itself terrifying to me. Like I like the idea that a lot of these characters who lived in the apartment were just very one note, and like that's all they needed to be to emphasize like they're fully committed to this. There's nothing else that they care about, that kind of thing. And so I guess like there's just the show just has a lot of stuff that I really like. And I think that's why for me, it's probably more disappointing that it's not getting continued because at some point I do want to just see a bit more of what's done. But there's just a lot that I like that then, even if there was a second season, there's a lot of mystery that's lost to the point where I was like, I hope this ends. And if there was a second season, it was going to be an anthology and it would just be a different story.
Yeah,
and then it turns
like
out LNG was going to be like an SCP Foundation where there's just other paranormal weird things going on.
What is hard to convey a little bit is that Archive 81 is an interesting mixture of elements that to genre enthusiasts, there's a lot of little things that are really nice. Like there's 2 great creepy locations. There's an engaging mystery. There's some fun lore. There's some found footage media stuff. There's some analog horror. There's all these little things that are very palatable to, I think, the current audience for horror, especially if you're an internet horror person. So if you've watched like the Walton Files or Pet Scop or any of that stuff, this is right up your alley. And so like, even if there's elements of it that don't necessarily pan out the way you want, it's an attractive package overall, which kind of is partially what makes the end resolution to everything so disappointing, is that none of either the threads wrap up in a way that I don't like, or they don't go anywhere, or they were theoretically supposed to be wrapped up at another time, which makes it somewhat hard to fully recommend as a show, because even the things you like kind of disappear into the ether a little bit by the end. So
what's interesting though for me is I feel like a lot of the stuff is more flavored to enhance the experience. So for instance, the one character was recording a bunch of tapes, and then we learned that another character who was in the compound had been converting those tapes into digital files. And it's like, oh, he's seeing a face in these soap operas. And for me, the flavor that enhances it is it means there was a person living in the Visser who was also seeing the face. So what could they do? They just decided, I'll use my VHS recorder to try to capture the demon in the videos. So they just started recording every soap opera that ever existed. Their television is constantly recording. I mean, this is peak pirating. You've never seen anything like it. And they're just doing something that's so mundane, which is, I think I see a demon or a ghost in the screen, I'm going to capture it, which is a cool comparison to the episode where they go into the past and there's this cult of people who are using photography to try to capture ghost orbs.
Which is a real thing that happened.
Yes.
Right. And it's just a cool modern perspective of like, I think I saw a ghost in this episode of this soap I like. I'm going to record it and make a compilation of it. And to me, that's really neat. It doesn't really change anything about the story. It doesn't need to be a paid off thing. And I feel like the show has a lot of stuff like that peppered in. Like the first introduction that there's a mold, right? That there's mold that is affecting people in a paranormal way. At first it's a little annoying, but then for me, I was like, no, that's pretty cool flavor of like, this is the quote unquote ectoplasm of the paranormal entity that's around. Like when it just starts to affect and touch stuff, it leaves this presence. And to me, I'm like, that's pretty neat. I also like the visual. I have been playing Elden Ring for a very long time. The first ending I got was the Lord of Frenzied Flame, and you get that by interacting with this thing called the Three Fingers. The whole world is dictated by the Golden Order, who chooses 2 fingers, but for some reason, there's this 3 fingers somewhere else in the world, and you can only find it at the very, very bottom of a location. And it has the similar aesthetic of that, where it's these fingerprints that are left everywhere, and they're like basically this evil fingerprints. Whereas if the 2 fingers are interacting, you learn about them through motion, but the 3 fingers, even their fingerprints are evil. And so like it has a cool visual aesthetic that I just think is awesome. And so for me, I guess I'll go cry after this episode. Oh, Netflix, why'd you cancel my show? But like to me, that all is just good flavoring for a horror story that I don't think there's really quite anything like it. I don't think I've seen something that has. I just haven't seen. I've watched a lot of analog horror stuff in a similar aesthetic, found footage stuff I like as a medium, because there's really, again, nothing like found footage. And even on YouTube, when there's like you mentioned Petscop or even Everyman Hybrid and stuff like that, which are just really interesting, complicated things. There's even an alternate reality. There's a blog. You know the one? It's a spelunker, and he just posted on a blog about spelunking into a cave.
Yeah. Thomas has told me about that.
I've read that blog.
It's so cool. And we finally get this really neat series that essentially took all of that and put it together. And like most creepypasta, like most our no sleep stuff, the ending's terrible. It never works out. But like, and you can't have an ending like the spelunking one where it's just, I'm going in, I may not come back. And it just, that's it. I guess he didn't come back.
That works in the medium of a blog.
Yeah. Right. The mystery
that does not work for a television show.
It doesn't. And they at least have the adding bonus of like, because it's a horror series, it can end like horror movies where the bad thing happens at the end and they don't survive. Like whatever.
This idea of like, I feel like it got away from them with this whole like, okay, we're going to raise the demon. We're going to have like this whole like creepy ritual or whatever. You can still have all of that, but I feel like they kind of forgot where they came from. Like you're talking about this, like the analog horror, the found footage and all that kind of stuff, because then there's a point where all of that, I don't want to say it stops because it doesn't, but it doesn't become the prevalent part. Like there's like a whole part where like he's no longer watching the video, but we're still getting Melody's perspective because he's off with his sidekick, the computer sidekick, like doing stuff, but we're still getting her stuff. So there's no more found footage stuff. We do see her recording and all that kind of stuff, and then sometimes she turns it back on herself or whatever. We see it through the lens of the camera. But it's not in the same vein as like Dan watching, which is what I found interesting. It just turns into so it gets away from them. Like they kind of forgot what their thesis was, and they like went down a rabbit trail and like focused on this demon thing.
It's also just scarier that he's limited by, I can only interact with the tapes.
Like he literally can't do anything. Yes.
Because that's what makes talking about the idea of like what makes some stories interesting is when you have a character watching something and they can't do anything about it. That adds more
tension,
terrifying nature to it. And that's why when he starts interacting in the tapes and these weird dream sequences, it becomes more interesting because it's like, well, it's already paranormal, so let's see how this develops.
But then it stops becoming paranormal because then he starts talking with his buddy, and they're trying to figure it out from like a detective side. Like, let's put up the whole like storyboard on the wall and like follow and connect the dots. Wall. Yeah, and not having these paranormal moments of like, okay, let me just like, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to dream, keep an eye on my body because I don't know what happens in the real world while I'm out here. Like, am I sleepwalking or whatever?
Like Insidious.
Yeah. Well, I've never seen it and I don't want to, so I have no idea what that references to. But like, they could have done something a little bit more clever like that. And like, sure. Okay. So some like what they ended up doing, because the guy, I think he went off and like went to like a video store and found the original, or was it a copy? I can't remember if it was a copy of.
It's a copy, and I think it's supposed to be Dan's old girlfriend because there's some drama that they have.
Yeah, that's right. So there's like tension there or whatever. So like there is a little bit of that, and they do use that to help them figure out what's going on. But it's no longer about this found footage. Like let's be the audience through the camera kind of thing, and that's where I think the mystery and the terror kind of lost it for me. Mm-hmm. That like it's almost like it went from black and white to color, and black and white for me is always a little creepier than it is for color because you see everything in color.
Which is why actually the choice to have it some stuff at the end be shot on the kids' camera was really cool to me.
That was clever.
But then like you said, it kind of goes in the wrong direction where he gets more agency.
Yeah,
he gets more agency and power. Even I mean, at this point, this is full spoilers. Everyone,
I think we went past that.
There's a point when he realizes like he has to go through a portal to save a character.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just
so weird.
It really kind of it's too much decision.
Can I just rant about the last episode?
Even his motivation, for sure. But like even his motivation, like I'm gonna go save her, changes to I need to find out what happens at the end, which was just a disappointment for me. But it wasn't unexpected because there's a scale. I think you've probably heard of this, Dan, where it's like a horror movie graded 7 out of 10 is pretty good versus a normal movie being 7 out of 10, which is pretty bad. And so like horror, when it gets to this point, is like, okay, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Because there's really effective good scares up to this point. Like for me, I think the journey was absolutely worth it. The exploration of it, but yeah, you get to that last episode and it's a little, I didn't even mind the period piece section. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was a fun little break.
I was vibing with it. Yeah, it's kind of like I was, because I'm a loser. I'll just like watch hour and a half long videos about things I've never experienced. So I was watching people talk about like Duke Nukem and Postal video games, and they were talking about like the problems with sequels. But they're like, this didn't need to be a great game, but it could have been a good Postal game, or it could have been a good Duke Nukem game. It's kind of like that, where it's like, I didn't expect high art, but I wanted this to be a nice little spooky thing. But for those who, obviously, if you've listened this far, you don't care about spoilers, but essentially, turns out that the demon creature needs the souls of the what's-it-evers because it needs to do something in the real world. But if they do this, it'll destroy the world. But the cult following it doesn't care, because the cults in these stories never seem to have like a vision of the end at all. They just go along for the ride.
Like, what was their motivation? Like, what did they think they were going to get out of it? Money, power,
for some reason,
fame?
Supernatural. Man.
They're somehow convinced that it's a good choice, and I loved the idea that it turns out the reason there's no more witches is because they did it once and
they're
it,
all
killed
dead.
all of them. So I was like, that's great. You've built up this guy to be a really scary thing that, like, if it effectively gets in, it's dangerous. I thought that was cool.
There's the cults where they're like, obviously what he'll do is best. He'll destroy the world but remake it or something, and all the other characters are like, why do you want to do that? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And
when she convinces the young girl, the 14-year-old, they're going to kill you. I love that, because it was like, she's the only smart one to go, oh, that's right.
You raise interesting points. Basically, they realized that to save Melody, because she's been taken by the demon thing, they need to send Dan through a portal. And there's a woman there who's been waiting a long time to do this. And so first off, the TV show has taken a drastic shift in tone at this point, where for the last episode, it stops being guy watches creepy footage story and becomes a universe traversing gallop where he has to go into an alternate dimension to save somebody. So already you're kind of losing me a little bit.
Yeah.
And okay, fine, whatever. But they come up with like the most like threadbare plan in the world, where you're just gonna go in there, grab her, and come back. And it's just like, you don't know what's on the other side of that. You could walk in and get stabbed to death by the devil. Like, you don't know. And like, you'll find a way back. Just go grab her. And I'm just like, okay. They don't even try a rope around his ankle or whatever. It's just a horrible plan. All they have is like, we have a tuning fork. Just follow the noise. And it's just like, you already established that's an alternate universe. Like, you don't know if you can hear it, whatever. So the plan doesn't make any sense. They go to this other universe, and I don't know if they just lost the budget, but this alternate universe is just the hotel. I was so disappointed. Yeah. I thought it'd be cool, or they'd do something with whatever, but it's just the hotel. It looks kind of grand. It looks like someone forgot to paint it recently, you know?
It could have had that thumbprint mold everywhere, and that would have been kind of neat.
Yeah, but would that have been
something?
But
it would have been like
too
just
much
the
like
other
the upside
side
down.
Yeah, I know that. I was
it
like,
looked like the upside down to me already, though.
Another
like
Stranger
true,
Things,
but I feel like that could have been a bit of a like, it's like, oh, we're just like, they're just kind of recycling an idea they had from Stranger Things of like to make this like other dimension of the world or whatever. Like, they could have made it a little bit different, but as soon as you were describing that, I'm like,
are big.
I don't know.
There's such a rich history of depictions of hell or hell-like places that they could have done something.
Yeah,
but
no, I definitely
the other
agree.
thing, like they also like, oh, the demon will get you. But the demon is just as limited in this world as he is in the real world. So he's supposed to be all powerful, and he's just still trapped in mirrors while they're there. And I'm just like, I thought he was the boss. This is home field advantage, man. Why is he still chasing them? Like, and Melody is just like, up to this point, has been a very intelligent, capable character. But the instant she's here, she's just damsel in distress, and so the character is just like, make stupid decisions. At one point, she literally just wanders away from Dan when they're trying to find him back. She just leaves the room and goes somewhere else. It's just it's a mess. And then another character who also transported there is apparently fine. He like grabs her last second. He escapes. Dan is left behind. It's just a mess. And everything that's the show about this show that's good is gone. It's not subtle or interesting.
No.
The lore is terrible. The rules don't make any sense. The logic doesn't make any sense. And then they even throw in the cherry on top, a horrible gut punch twist ending, which is Dan has been transported back to the past, and that makes, just so you know, that it's 1990
Twin Towers
whatever.
there, it's awesome.
Kurt Cobain's death is on the news. It just happens to be playing, so you know what time it is.
And also the Twin Towers. I loved it.
And there's the Twin Towers their shadow is cast.
I wish there was a Wikipedia like collection of the shadow of the Twin Towers, and it's all films that use the Twin Towers to tell you it's the past. It's like it's so bad.
Yeah, and
oh man,
and the fact that like I'm blanking on the villain's name, but like he is such a terrible villain. Like, he's the human bad guy at the hotel. He's such a flat character that he's just so interesting. The fact he's such a big part of the final episode is annoying. Everything about it annoyed me. It's so bad. It just becomes this other less interesting show. I am baffled by it, and then the fact that that's just what we have now. It's canceled. It just makes it so much worse. So
I wonder if the ending was different. And then they were told, like, hey, make it like maybe they were told, like, hey, because maybe they shot this sequentially. Who knows? Starting from the first episode, and producers were seeing that the dailies and stuff. They're like, this is good. Change the ending to make it so you can go into another season or something. Only to then ultimately, like,
and
2 months later,
they giggled
like,
behind their back as soon as they left the office. Like,
yeah,
oh, we'll show them.
Yeah, because like it does feel like that. It feels like there's just reveals and scares that are so well handled throughout the show, and then this happens.
Yeah. And then a creature from the Sci-Fi Channel chases them around,
right.
like the reused set that they threw a filter on. Like,
right.
Ugh.
I have two things. Would you compare it to the way, because you guys have, I think it's been you guys who have talked about this. I watch a lot of review stuff, so it's like building into my head.
Yeah.
How like Marvel movies, like WandaVision, like kind of starts out really cool, really slow, and then like it ends in a big boss fight. Like, would you kind of compare that to this? Like, it's nice and slow, and then boom, here's
mentioning
like a boss
Insidious
fight.
It actually is kind of like Insidious.
It's a lot like Insidious, but like not as good as that.
I'll take your word for it.
Insidious has great scares. Insidious handles its scares in a like there's this what can only be called like a paranormal home invasion in that movie, and it's really terrifying, and it just keeps escalating, and something new happens and they cleverly use the senses to also affect it, because they play a lot of noises and like it's just really good. And then like they've changed location, and it keeps happening, and they keep playing up with new things, and so it's like it's constantly rewarding, and then it gets to the end. And it's not nearly as fun. It's like a different movie. I've come to appreciate some of the choices it does, and then I also just like that franchise. So it's been I've when you accept what it is, it becomes a little more enjoyable. But it is so similar to that, where it's like another world, and you can kind of influence it, but doesn't. But when you go into the other world, there's almost more you can do than if you were just in the normal world. So it doesn't have any trade-offs. It's just better. And so it's just it's unrefined. It's incomplete. And it becomes something where by giving your characters more power by doing this thing, you really eliminate what fear is. Fear is a lack of power, a limitation. The mystery is how to work with what you have, and that's why the tapes are interesting. Will I learn something new in the tapes? Will I get something new in the tapes? The fact that in the tapes she starts saying things he said to her in dreams is like immediately terrifying, and you're like, what's happening? And that's so cool. And then it just doesn't go anywhere. Like I said, like I like the flavor of it. Even the fact that like you learn that certain objects might have spirits attached to it. So that might explain some of why she's there in the place. And even the fact that there's a room that's locked that then is opened because she goes into it is cool. But it adds fear and mystery. Like the paranormal allows you to move the plot forward, because how else is he going to get into that room that's locked? He can't. Like, it's just, but the paranormal makes it possible. Why? Because it can't. Okay. It's like magic and other stuff. Stop trying to make logic to it. Time travel, don't make logic to it. Just let it be a plot device. But you also get, strikes. You use strikes up, and at some point you're out. And the final episode is like, it's like all outs it's like you're in inning 1 and you've already lost the game. And it's a shame, man. I was okay with it because I was like, fine, whatever, you're setting up a season 2. But yeah, because there's no season 2, it's just weird. Especially when you have good performers. and you have an interesting world. It's like I want to see more, but that's it. That's the movie. That's the show. That's it. I don't know what else there is, you know?
So it makes me wonder that, like, how would you guys have felt if the last episode or even the last 30 minutes was part of season 2? Like, we didn't get, like, we were, if they were going to do a season 2 and they just kind of ended season 1 with a little bit more of like the mystery. Maybe he figured out like this is what the cult is doing. Like, we do get a little bit of that, but we don't get this like interdimensional thing until season 2. Do you think that would have been more successful?
I don't think that the interdimensional stuff works in this story
At all.
I think that in this story, the limitations of the tapes is what makes sense.
Right.
The concept of interdimensional stuff, like the reason why SCP is so interesting, or even Dave or Dan, you played through Control, so you also have a bit of that too. What
episode is this? How many episodes have we done?
Of what? Mentioning Control? This is over 100 episodes.
Of Cinematic Doctrine.
Over 100 episodes.
This is the first time you ever called me Dave. What happened?
It's because at work, my boss is named Dave, and I even messed that up too. I messed it up there.
It'd been good from this point on, you just call me Dave. We never told anyone why.
Oopsie. Yeah.
But yes, I have played Control and have said many nice things about the game. Yes.
Yeah, and I want to finish Quantum Break before I get into Control. But you have your one object in this world that has powers, and it's just that. That's why SCP is interesting. One of my favorite SCPs is a casket. And if you go to it in person, nothing happens to you. But in the particular recording of the SCP interaction, the people are going to it. They're dressed up in SWAT gear. They have cameras on their helmets so that people back at the Foundation can watch. And the people in the Foundation are freaking out, and they start dying, killing each other. And it's because the object itself doesn't affect you, but if you watch it on a video feed, then it does. And the closer the camera gets to the object, the more effect it has on you. And so this particular SCP only has the ability to affect you through that limitation. And that's cool. But the second you start tossing in, also a demon comes out of it. It doesn't work anymore. Now it's just like all the other things where a demon just comes out. Like that loses it.
It's a classic example of a hat on a hat. You know, it's just like
why would I want a hat on a hat? It's stupid.
You have a nice, perfectly great idea, and then I don't know if this is because this could all be from the original podcast for all I know.
Is this the Nintendo 64 controller where you put a third handle on it and it doesn't matter because no one's got a third hand?
Hey, the N64 controller is one of the best. All right.
It's definitely iconic, but why does it have 3 handles?
There's a handful of games that utilize it more like I'm making gestures and I don't even have a camera turned on me, so I'm not doing it. But there's certain games that utilize the full controller. I'll just say that. But like you have a perfectly great. It does, like, to go back to your initial question, Shirley, like if it does, is this like the same MCU thing, or someone in a suit was just like, you gotta have a bunch of punching at the end, you gotta have a big fight at the end.
Yeah, why does he grab Davenport and fight him? That's so funny to me.
It's but like, why do we need a big weird thing where they suddenly becomes like an episode of Supernatural or something, where a guy in a spirit Halloween costume chases them through like a corn maze or whatever.
The costumes in Supernatural are actually pretty good for their time. I'm just going to put that out there.
Supernatural's fun. It's a fun show. It's too long.
So much fun.
In our very first episode together, I defended Supernatural to Melvin. I don't know if anyone remembers it.
I think we're on season 4.
I do.
So.
I liked seasons 1 and 2. And then it is interesting after that. And then it becomes just
around season 5-ish is when I would say stop watching. So you're almost at that point.
I'll let you know. I'm going to watch the whole thing. I'll let you know how you guys feel about it.
You will become like all fans of the show, where you start rooting against the show.
You'll become a recurring guest on the. We'll have you as a recurring guest. You just update us on where you are in Supernatural. Just like your friend of the Supernatural update is Shirley. Just like Team Destiel. All right, well, see you later. You know,
I had a coworker who literally said they loved the show, and then they told me they only watch because they want to see how they lose, like how they start failing.
They just want to get to the Scooby-Doo crossover episode. That's all of us.
That's the one I'm waiting for.
More ghost faces.
Anyway,
this is. I don't know if I think maybe if season 2, like Melvin makes a great point where it's just like there's something, the inherent draw of the show is in the relatively small scale that you have. And I think you can have elements of there's an alternate universe with a demon in it as long as it's background. Like, if that's the mysterious evil behind the danger, that works great. But once you start showing him in the light, it just loses punch. So maybe if there was a season 2 that was much more focused on that, at least the transition would be smoother. But I would definitely see it being one of those instances where people are like, oh yeah, season 1 is great. Season 2 gets so weird. And then people kind of like drop off around that point. But I think they just wanted a hook. But I think a better hook for another season would have just been if Melody and Dan don't meet until the last 20 minutes of the last episode. And then meeting each other is like if they literally just meet and they go like, hi, and then it cuts to black. Like that's a more intriguing cliffhanger to me, because it's just like, oh man, what's going to happen now that they know each other? Because there's people where they're drawn into that relationship aspect of it. And then even if there's like, if the show gets canceled, it's canceled on a note where you're just like, well, they finally connected. And that's kind of a happy ending in and of itself. And they weren't like chased through multiple dimensions. And one person gets left in the 1994, 92. When did Kurt Cobain die? I should know this, but
I don't know. But it says 94.
Well, he died at some point. And right around that time is when Dan is in 1990s. So So like, would we say that we recommend watching it though?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not bothered.
Just the difference of reactions is great.
It's totally fine that it is the last 30 minutes. I don't find it as destructive to the enjoyment of watching the show as I think some people do, because
the journey's still fun.
The journey is still fun. I mean, I liked the Scream show, the first 2 seasons and the little movie at the end. And that's never getting resolved because the 3rd season is just a new show with completely new characters. So it's like, it doesn't really affect me that much, because I thought the little bits of flavor here and there make it really enjoyable and worthwhile. As for it being on Netflix and Netflix's routine problem, I mean, I even opened up literally just a list on Wikipedia of Netflix's shows. Control F, I typed in canceled. Takes me right down to the bottom where all the sources are. And it is like 56 things that say canceled down here. And it's like a bunch of shows that are not done. Like I didn't even know Glow isn't done.
Yeah,
like
Glow got canceled,
and that's like Emmy nominated. What is going on? Like, and there's even Santa Clarita Diet. They're pushing on me all the time. I didn't know that was canceled. What? Like, what is going on here? So, like, as for that, it's like fine. That's what I was going to recommend on the podcast. I'll just even briefly mention it now. There's a show called Land of the Giants, and they did a season on Netflix. And there's a section where they talk about Netflix obviously is a weird company because it's a tech company. So of course it's weird. It's got a stupid structure, but they have a thing where literally anybody can sit down with anybody and just assess their job performance and like then propose to other people like, hey, I think this person isn't doing well and we can replace them, stuff like that. And there's a lot of people who are willingly comfortable with that because they find that like, okay, if it's time for me to go, if it's not best for Netflix, it's time to go. But for some reason, they just are comfortable doing that with their shows too, which is so ridiculous. And so there's almost a spite where it's like, no, don't watch it. Forget it. Like stop watching Netflix in general. They have a new show. Who cares? This is ridiculous. It's not worth sticking around to check it out because why bother? Stranger Things, they might as well end it on a cliffhanger and then be like, hey, we canceled it.
Yeah.
Because like, why do they think that that's earned it? Because it's just stupid. It's so stupid.
The last episode of the cast of Stranger Things talking about where they wanted the show to go and what they would have done if they weren't canceled.
Yeah,
for like 2.5 hours.
This is like Altered Carbon got canceled, and I heard that had a really strong niche. And it's like, okay, I get it, it's too expensive, but just slash the budget. Even AMC just like was like season 1 of it. The Walking Dead kills it. The most watched opening of a show, just in general. It is massive, and even they were like, double the episode count, we're slashing your budget in half, which is just maddening. I even got Frank Darabont to quit the show and be like, look, these are all my friends that I invited onto the show. I made Shawshank Redemption. Like, come on. They treated him poorly. And yet that show is still going. So I don't know.
I think it's in its final season.
Is it?
I think so, yeah.
But they still have like 3 movies that they're planning. There's like 3 movies they want to do with I forget the lead guy, but him, because he's still alive,
Rick,
in the show or whatever. But like still, it's like
Can't kill Rick.
It's a cool show. But I'm almost at a point where like I've been talking to Dan about watching the Halo show purely because I want to do a hate episode where we just watch the show and then I tell you about how bad it is. Because boy, I've heard things. But it's the first time in a long time I've been tempted to pirate. And I am feeling the same way about like Netflix shows at this point, where it's like, I even heard the OA is like a great niche show for people who love absurdist comedy and emotional stuff. Like, but it's like that was canceled after 2 seasons and it's just a cliffhanger. What are we supposed to do with this? Why am I paying you $18 a month? And I'm not even paying, right? I borrowed it from my father-in-law. Well, who would pay for this if it's just unfinished shows? They make this argument of like, well, when you buy the series, it's still content. I know we canceled that Baz Luhrmann show after 1 season that nobody liked, but you still get it when you pay for our service. But it's not done.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to read Harry Potter, but the last 4 chapters of the first book are missing. Every single book is like that. Yeah. That's stupid. Yeah. That is so stupid. So, I don't know what to say about this show. I think it's good. I think all the performances are great. I feel bad for all these actors who get committed to something. And yes, it's been made clear that everybody is grossly overpaid if you work for Netflix. Grossly overpaid. And Hollywood is just going to comfortably get back at them because Netflix has been trying to mock them, even with billboards. You go down Hollywood Boulevard and every billboard is a Netflix billboard, which is stupid, right? Because why are you advertising to Hollywood? Like, these people don't watch them, they make them. But it's this like comeuppance that's coming to them where it's like your show, which was in the top 10 at the start of the year for a really long time, within 2 months gets canceled. What am I supposed to do? Like, who wants to contract?
Are you saying there's billboards just promoting the service Netflix in Hollywood?
The shows from Netflix, but specifically
the
like
idea
Netflix.
Of someone who's like in Hollywood going Netflix.
Right, that's the point though. Like, obviously it's there and they do it on purpose. Is that similar to
Quibi? But like
basically.
It's like could happen longer,
Like they bought the Chinese theater when it was going to be brought down. And so like Netflix was
Quibi
constant.
Did?
No, Netflix.
That's where all their money went.
But Quibi might as well have. But it's the same mentality. And so like it's so messed up. And so like at this point, why would anybody want to work with Netflix to sell their show to them? Like they were the place you'd go to do this. And now it's like I have just started getting into TV shows this year. All right. This is totally new for me. And like, I just can't stand it because it's like the shows I'm watching are just dying left and right. Could you imagine if Yellowstone was on Netflix? They probably would have canceled that. And that's like the biggest show since like Game of Thrones, since Breaking Bad. And it would have just been canceled if it was on Netflix. And I just don't get it. All right, I'm off my soapbox. All right, I'm out of here.
Good job.
I gotta go pee again because I've been drinking too much coffee. Someone else take over.
Netflix is reportedly looking into what's called live streaming.
What? That's weird.
And if that sounds just like television,
right?
Yeah,
that's where they're going to add the commercials. Because that was the last thing I heard was they were going to add commercials to Netflix.
There's going to be a tier that has commercials.
Dear gosh.
Which it's going to the tier would stream in 440 or not 1080p and have commercials. Right. And it's just like, at that point, why am I paying for Netflix?
Right? Yeah. I mean, we for a while, my husband had like he was paying for the YouTube thing, so we didn't have commercials. Okay. He got rid of it. It was just, I guess, save money, not using it as much. But now, like, when we put on the TV, we start going through YouTube, and then we switch to Netflix. So, like, now we're watching a lot of YouTube, and it's just commercial after commercial after commercial. And we are just not a commercial society anymore.
We've evolved past that, yes.
The impatience is real. And, of course, Melvin's gone. But I was going to say, with Netflix, I don't watch any Netflix shows. Like
Me neither.
Netflix made by Netflix. We'll watch Supernatural. 2 of my favorite shows that are totally guilty pleasures are on there, and I'll watch them even though I own them on DVD. Occasionally, I'll watch when like the Great British Bake Off comes back because I think that's now a Netflix thing, and I don't think that'll be canceled because they're too precious. So like, I'll watch that. And then like I end up watching it for a bunch of documentaries that I think Netflix does do, but a documentary is just like a once and done thing. and then the whatever. So like, I
Right.
don't understand the pain of these Netflix shows being canceled, except I guess Archive 81 at this point. But that is, I can't even imagine how frustrating that is. Welcome back.
Yeah.
I'm not okay with
We
this.
missed
When you say
That was canceled, and that was great.
When you say you watch, are you saying you watch like the YouTube live TV thing, or you
No,
just
we just watch
YouTube?
YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, if you get YouTube Premium, it takes ads off.
Like we'll just be like, oh, YMS is here, and then what else do we watch? I do a lot of Red Letter
Media.
and then there's a couple. Thomas really likes to watch like video essays. We'll watch stuff on like music scores and like how light motifs are used here and there. I've got some book stuff, and then video. Like you were talking about the what was that video game thing? You're the Patrol
Elden
and
Ring?
like Doom or something.
Doom
Dan,
Duke
2016.
Nukem and
Yes.
Postal.
I'm almost positive I know what video you might be referencing on
Oh,
YouTube
really?
because I think I watched it. I don't know anything about those two.
Well,
Well, there was
things,
a new
but we just
Postal anyway.
watched
No
it.
regrets. There was a new one.
Yeah.
So,
I'll send you the video to see if it's the same video.
It might be.
Just out of curiosity.
But like we'll watch stuff like that on YouTube, and like so Netflix really isn't used in our home
No,
unless
not
we're
mine
watching.
either.
Oh, we Stargate. We'll watch Stargate on there, and Supernatural, and all those shows are done because they weren't done by Netflix. They're just all completed. Whether or not they're completed well is up for argument. Is fine, but they're done. They weren't canceled, except Supernatural, which was then brought back, but still.
I would say like a huge chunk of the amount of entertainment that we consume in my household is YouTube in some regard.
Mhm.
My wife watches. There's a guy who bought a abandoned ghost town, like an old mining town, and he's just restoring it.
That's cool.
And so she's watching that. She watches videos from people who do like they find rare like rocks and minerals, or they restore old like weaponry, or
That's fun.
she watches different animal channels that do stuff like they rescue strays and stuff like that. So and she also, one thing we share in common is we watch like stuff from people who make costumes and things like that. So there's just like these are people that most people never heard of, but they have a huge core audience of like 1 million to 2 million viewers or whatever. So there's all this like niche, but like huge niche, like big, I don't know what it's termed for, big fan bases that exist that, you could just do that instead of paying $10 a month for like low quality Netflix. I don't know. I also don't watch a lot of Netflix. Most people I know don't really watch much Netflix. Melvin's the most Netflixy person I know at this point.
Yeah.
And I have stand them on the podcast. I think they're fascinating to me as like I think they do a good. Their form of data collection isn't offensive to me because it's literally we collect your data from watching our service to then show you better stuff or show you stuff we think you'll like. And for the most part, they usually get it right. There's things I like, and I find their. I overheard the documentaries discussion. Like I've watched like 5 or 4 of those this year.
I did watch the John Wayne Gacy documentary they put out.
I've heard that. I had a friend
that one.
standing that to me, said it was pretty good. I've been meaning to check it out, and like I've watched a couple of their shows and enjoyed them. I know, of course, they're at least on their top 10 and stuff, which I would hope it's not weighted. But like a Netflix watches counts as 2 points and a non-Netflix watch is 1 point. And so that's why it's always just a ton of Netflix stuff in the top 10. But they have put out good stuff. Like I, of course, have stand. I'm not okay with this. I think that's great. And of course, that was canceled. And part of that was
Mindhunter got canceled too.
Mm-hmm.
Which one?
Mindhunter.
That's right. The other one, which was really weird because David Fincher is like helped make Netflix. He helped with House of Cards, and then Mindhunter is supposed to be great, and then of course he had Mank and stuff like that. But yeah, that of course was canceled over quarantine. But it's not like Sophia Lillis and crew are doing anything else, so I don't know why they didn't just decide, okay, we'll make the show cheaper.
I'm gonna say something crazy.
What?
Netflix is the Facebook of streaming services.
I don't think they're as detrimental to society as Facebook, but I'd like to see some clarification.
They were the first. They really created the market that they exist in, but the rest of the market is slowly leaving them behind. And the primary user base that I hear about is old people. When I think, I was just thinking, like, who do I know that like pays for Netflix? It's like the parents of people I know or older folks.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I don't pay for Netflix. I use my in-laws.
Yeah, I use our
And most of the
parents.
shows I know that were popular for our generation are the ones getting canceled. Like Dark Crystal Age of Resistance was pretty big, I think, within our generation,
Mhm.
and that got canceled. I thought that was great. I
Mhm.
thought it was really good. And it was the first time a prequel enhanced the first product. It made the Dark Crystal better by watching Age of Resistance. And that ends on a cliffhanger that was really, really compelling. And it's just like all of these shows that are big for our generation are just not getting continued. Mindhunter's big with our generation, and that's just not getting carried over. But I just don't. And part of it is the way that they release shows, right? Like they release shows like a movie. So
Mhm.
they've spent way more than a movie has ever cost on a show, drop it in a weekend, and it only has enough staying power that weekend.
Mhm.
No one's talking about it further. That's why whenever a Squid Game or a Queen's Gambit comes out, and Queen's Gambit was like in the top 10 for like 6 months. It was huge. When we reviewed it on the podcast, it was only off the top 10 for like a month. And like, so we weren't really that late to talk about it on the show. And like, they stick around because for some reason, every now and then something really captures the attention of people. Guess what? That's like a movie. And only like 3 movies a year do that. Right now, it's Everything Everywhere. It's still getting talked about, still getting posted about, still being brought up. I have people texting me every now and then like, hey, did you see this movie? And it's like, it's at this point, it's old for me. And that happens every year. There's always something like that comes out. I think like 2 years ago before pandemic, it was like The Lighthouse was that, where like it was in, or even Parasite. But like, that's also a movie. You watch it once, it's finished because it's a movie, and it doesn't cost an obscene amount of money. And like, then you have these shows that are treated that way, which part of the benefit of a show in a marketing sense is you have a week to week engagement. If you do have an ad tier, that's week to week ad placement. It's, and you, because you're doing a show that's week to week, you don't need to produce as much. Like every 3 or 4 days, something new ends up on Netflix. And I'm like, nobody produces content like this. Even when they did it back in like, I think 2017 was the first year that Bright was their first movie, which we all should have taken as a bad omen. Like that year, they produced more content than any studio was producing, which they tried to tout as a big deal. But that's like, I don't know. It's like when someone's, I remember when I was at the center, we all, by being at the center, we got gym memberships to just go to the gym because that's part of mental health improvements. And I go to the gym with someone and like I'm on the treadmill, I'm just running, getting my heart rate up because you want to get your heart rate up before you go doing lifting and stuff. It helps with your body balancing stuff. And this guy next to me, who's also at the center and he'd never exercised, he puts it on the highest setting and he's sprinting like a madman. So he's like, just like, it's like embarrassing to watch, but it's like the kind of mentality you get when it's like, I want to be like the best, like no one ever was. He's got the Pokemon theme song playing in his head. And it's like, dude, you're doing it all wrong. This is dangerous. You're going to be exhausted tomorrow. It's unhealthy. Your heart rate probably shouldn't be that high for so long anyway. Your sedentary lifestyle to Sonic the Hedgehog. That's bad. Like this is, and I think like Netflix functioned in the same way where it's like, it's the nerd kid who finally has like determination to be not the nerd kid and not be made fun of when he should just be comfortable going at his own pace, which will be healthier and better. And like that they throw all this money to make a movie like Bright with Will Smith. It's just a dumpster fire. And they only just recently canceled that they were going to work on the sequel. Why? What the heck? Why would they even? I don't know, man. I like Netflix because I like a lot of their model and I like a lot of their content because I think it's comfortably fine. It's strange because the content itself never shoots for the stars, even if the company's trying to so hard, that I find that endearing. And every now and then they put out something that I think is really good, but it's always something I like that gets canceled. Like I even started watching Lady Dynamite and it's one of the best things I've watched, one of the funniest things I've watched, just period. And it's like they canceled it after 2 seasons. It's just weird. I don't get it, man. I keep scrolling down this list and it's just like Raising Dion canceled after 2 seasons, Spitting Out canceled, Gentafield canceled, Black AF canceled. What's going on?
Is somebody show?
It's just weird.
So Shirley, would you recommend Archive 81?
It's crazy.
I think if you go into it knowing how it ends. So like I feel like I guess it would kind of spoil even the whole show. If you understand that it gets a little weird at the end and you're kind of prepared for that, then yes. Because I definitely am on that bridge of like, it was good. I don't know. I know I said I was going to watch it again. Melvin, you had stepped out and I told Dan that I lied. I didn't watch it over the weekend.
I had my headphones on. I heard you guys while I was in the bathroom. How does that make you guys feel?
That's weird.
Yeah, he always has his headphones
weird.
on in the bathroom. Just
I'm really
even when I'm not podcasting, my headphones are on.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And like as I'm kind of thinking about it, rewatching it, there's no rewatchability for me, so I don't know if that even like means anything for me. So I don't really know if I recommend. I'm very like, a show that I'm gonna recommend. I'm like all there for, but I don't know. Take it or leave it, to be honest. I think part of it too is like, so I went into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, Archive 81, it's about archives. Or like, it's going to do something with that. Okay, it doesn't. And so I was maybe a little bit disappointed about that. Like, I do kind of wish they went a little bit more into like the film preservation side and showed a little bit more of that. But that's just me as an archivist kind of wanting
something more cool.
Well, I wonder what the data is on archivists and how they feel about the show.
So I definitely on our team's like water cooler for work. I should have done it last week, but I didn't because I'm a procrastinator. I was like, oh guys, I'm doing this. If you have thoughts, put them below and I'll share them on the podcast. No one said anything. The president is like, wow, you're up really early. I'm like, this is normal for me. And that was the only thing. So people reacted to it and they did like the little heart and the little thumbs up. And I'm like, great guys. So what do we think?
That means nothing to me.
So I honestly don't know. We were recommending it to each other when it was like first coming out, but I don't know how people actually felt about it. So if I hear anything, I'll come back and let you know.
Oh, follow-up episode.
Archivists hate it.
That's our clickbait thumbnail on YouTube.
Yeah, archivists hate this show.
I have a similar recommendation that way where I definitely think it's worth watching. I think it's better. It might improve your experience to know that it kind of has this kind of dead ending, or at minimum, you're not going to like the fact it ends on a cliffhanger, and you have no idea what happens to any of these characters. Where if you're like me and you actually found yourself getting kind of like attached to them and you liking the characters, that's kind of a bummer. And also like just being prepared for the tone shift. I think that's part of what I found so unappealing about it was so almost antithetical to what was so appealing about the show earlier. So I think going in with that, but I still think it's a good experience. I think especially if you are at all a consumer of the things that we've talked about in terms of analog horror or internet horror, I think you'll find it very appealing. I also don't know at all, and I wish I'd done research in this area, how people who like the podcast feel about the show.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be interesting.
I don't know what that is like, but I'm saying this as someone who has not. I've subscribed to it on my Overcast app. I have not listened to it yet.
Me too.
But we'll see. But who knows? Maybe in the future I will let y'all know. There's a lot of, much like Archive 81, there's many dangling threads left from this podcast episode for the future. So
yeah, I enjoyed it. I think as it's always fun to see directors go into producing, and so James Wan just producing this, basically going like, hey, do you like my movies? Check out some more stuff that I think will be similar. And so in that way, I think this is pretty cool to check out. And I'd like to see him produce more stuff just to see, because I like his style of horror. I think he's very good at it. I think if just assuming he had any involvement, I think he probably helped give some direction on like how to pace out some horror and do some good mystery, and it just has some good scenes. It has a lot of stuff to like, and it feels, if you like video games, it even has a cool video game aesthetic where essentially like you can practically experience a first person perspective of Dan Turner holding the crowbar like he's in BioShock. Like that's all pretty cool. And yeah, it's just worthwhile, I think, in the sense of like when you're looking for good horror shows to check out, this one's really quite intelligent and cleverly written. I'd like to even keep up with the writers for this show to see like what do they have next? What are they going to have going on? Hopefully they don't contract with Netflix and they check out, I don't know, HBO or Peacock even, or something like that, to actually have an ending to their show or something like that. So Definitely recommended. Yeah, having the qualifier of like, yeah, the last 30 minutes is kind of a mess, but if you kind of accept it, it's okay. Like it's fine. And I've seen plenty of horror movies where the ending is they didn't actually get out in the end. I mean, it's the classic. You put the convertible top up and it's Freddy Krueger's jacket or sweater. So whatever. I'm totally fine with that. But why don't we start with you, Cheryl? What recommendation do you have for our podcast listeners?
So I'll start with a show. I have a show and then I have a game recommendation.
Okay.
This show is on Hulu, so hopefully no threat of cancellation.
Yeah.
So it's called Only Murders in the Building. And
great show.
It's fantastic. It also takes place relatively in a single place. So it's in an apartment building called the Arconia. I think it's New York or something. And it stars Martin Short, Steve Martin, and Selena Gomez. And their chemistry together is fantastic. And Martin Short and Steve Martin, their chemistry is always really great. But Selena Gomez definitely, as the younger character, pairs really well. But it's about 3 characters who are obsessed with a true crime podcast, which is hosted by Tina Fey. And so they're obsessed with listening. They don't know each other until something happens in their apartment building, and they all kind of meet up in a restaurant by chance. And they're just kind of talking. And then the podcast comes up and they start like, oh my goodness, did you hear this? What do you think here? All this kind of stuff. But then a death happens in their building that the police rule a suicide. And they don't believe that it is. So they go off and investigate on their own. And what I really love about the show is the characters. So Steve Martin plays a character. His name is Charles Hayden Savage, who is a semi-retired actor of a 90s detective drama called Brazos. And so everyone recognizes him as Brazos. He kind of acts as Brazos himself because that's just like the character he was. And then Martin Short is Oliver Putnam, who was a struggling Broadway director who is always looking for his next production. Like he's constantly writing and trying to pitch things. And like his whole life is like, oh, can this be this? Can this be a play? Can this be? And he's like super excited, like this little kid. He's kind of the awkward one who speaks out of turn half the time in the show. And then Selena Gomez, I think she's an artist, and she's renovating her aunt's apartment. And they each are somehow connected to the murder victim in some little way, but you don't really know until the end. And luckily, last year in September, it was renewed for a second season that drops on June 28th. And I highly recommend it because it's super fun. The intro theme is super fun and colorful. It's almost like it kind of reminds me of Scooby-Doo in a way, the way it kind of like silhouettes each of the characters as they go up in the window of the apartment building. It's really fun. You should definitely check it out. It's great.
And I'm going to recommend Land of the Giants, the particular season called The Netflix Effect. It gives some really fascinating background on Netflix's business model and how the program basically works on the inside. Of course, they give what most people generally think about is like the Netflix versus Blockbuster system. And so it's a good show. And it gives, like I said, a good background on how they function. I think came out in 2020. I can't remember. I think that is 2020 when it was coming out. So it's about 2 years old. And that was when everyone thought Netflix was definitely here to stay because their stock went up. Everybody started buying them, artificially increasing their value because, man, what were we going to do? Like, we just stayed home all the time. So, but yeah, it's definitely fascinating. It definitely continues a bit of our thread here in the last couple episodes where it's a Patreon episode and now this one where we're talking about Netflix and I guess just the existence of them. It would be quite fascinating to hear them do maybe a bonus episode to continue it. Of course, they have other subjects that they've covered, like they've talked about Amazon, they talk about Google, they just talk about really, really big, massive companies and stuff like that they've done. It looks like Grubhub and Uber Eats or something like that, which is all pretty cool. So definitely going to recommend Land of the Giants, specifically their Netflix season. What do you have, Dan?
I was thinking about great canceled shows, and all of you cool kids out there will be familiar with Brian Fuller, who is sort of notorious for never seeing a show to fruition, and it's never his own fault. He was removed as one of the people behind the American Gods TV show. He got kicked off of Dead Like Me after like 2 episodes. The 2 shows he's probably most famous for are Hannibal, which was canceled before its time. Wonder Falls,
right.
also canceled before its time. However, the show I'm going to recommend is his other show, which is currently on HBO Max. It lasted for only 2 seasons with a total episode a number of 22. So it's not a large commitment. It is called Pushing Daisies. It is just wonderful. If you have not seen it, I highly, highly, highly recommend you at least watch the pilot episode, as it's visually wonderful. The characters are so fun and quirky. It has a magnificent premise for a weekly television show. Great cast. I cannot say enough nice things about it. The basic premise is a guy finds that he has the ability to bring things back to life with just one single touch. However, the additional caveat is if he touches them again, they're back dead permanently. And there's a couple other additional rules on it. And so Chi McBride plays a private detective that utilizes his ability to help solve cold cases and murders. So he goes, touches the dead body, and he grills them for a minute, because if he waits longer than a minute, if he kills them again, then another person has to die somewhere in proximity. So there's all these rules keeping him in place. So that itself is a great formula for a weekly detective show. However, there's an additional wrinkle I will not spoil, as it's probably one of the best things about the show. It's extremely funny and charming and visually inventive in a way I haven't seen in a mainstream television show in a while. It is on HBO Max right now. So do yourself a favor and watch another horribly canceled show called Pushing Daisies.
And then what do you have, Cheryl?
So my final recommendation is a board game called Unmatched, which is from a company called Restoration Games. And what they do is they take games that are no longer being made or published, and they reboot them. And so Unmatched, I can't exactly remember the game that it's from. It's an old Star Wars game, but they've refaced it to be characters pitted against each other to find out who is like the best of the best. So they take many characters who are in the public domain. So like they have, let me get my list, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, King Arthur, Medusa, and Sinbad, and you fight them against each other. And they all have sidekicks. Alice has the Jabberwock, King Arthur has Merlin, and you just kind of fight each other. And you have like a deck of cards that are very thematically chosen. Words are not working for me today. That really work for the characters. If I had some off the top of my head, I would share like how they work, but it's a really fun game, and you can mix and match from different boxes. So like they have another one where they have Dracula and Jekyll and Hyde. So you can have Dracula fight Alice. You can fight Bigfoot. You can fight Robin Hood. They also have a bunch of Marvel characters. We just got the one that has Moon Knight, Daredevil, Elektra, Luke Cage, some other ones, and you can just
Midnight Suns.
Yes, you can mix and match all of them together. So if you want to know who would win between Robin Hood and the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, you could totally do that.
That's cool.
And it's really fun. So we have a whole collection of them, and we just pull them out. It's easy to play with a bunch of friends. You can play with up to 4, and it's just kind of fun to see like the what ifs of who would win in this mythological hero fight. So that's all I could recommend so many more things, but we don't have enough time in the podcast. So you should have me on again.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. It was pretty fun. And
it was a lot of fun.
I'm glad you reached out about it too, because I know we wanted to have you on again. So
yes.
Thanks so much, Cheryl.
Yeah, recommend another book to film adaptation, and I'll be on again.
Well, that could be cool.
Because that would be a lot of fun.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Cinematic Doctrine. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a review and subscribing to the podcast. And as mentioned before, Cinematic Doctrine has a Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you're opted into a once-a-month movie poll where you decide a movie we discuss on the podcast. There are other unique benefits that come with supporting the podcast, so be sure to check that out at patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine. A special shout out to those who support at the Art House Theater tier on Patreon. Thank you so much, Mom, Dad, Melanie, Shirleon, and Thomas. You guys are the best, and your continued monetary support is greatly appreciated. Until next time, stay cool. Want some Cinematic Doctrine swag? You're in luck. We've got 3-inch Cinematic Doctrine logo stickers exclusive for Patreon supporters. Perfect for your travel mug or laptop. Head over to patreon.com/Cinematic Doctrine, link in the show notes, and choose the independent theater tier. Doing so will net you other perks too. But let's be real, the podcast stickers are the coolest perk. So get yourself some podcast stickers by supporting on Patreon.